G'day guys, Shawnee from Life and Tennis. In today's video, I'll be discussing Rafa Nadal's recent comments surrounding his two greatest rivals, Federer and Djokovic, on Andy Roddick's Serve podcast, not too long ago. So yeah, this one has sort of come up in a few different social media posts that I've seen recently, and lots of debate surrounding, we're always evaluating and comparing the big three, who's the greatest of all time, and even like comparing game styles and eras and things like that. And we all have our favorites, obviously. For me personally, I've always been a Federer fan through and through. But I do acknowledge that, Novak does have the best stats from a stat point of view. It's pretty hard to argue against Novak, and I've said this a few times on the channel before. But the comments that Rafa made, not so much comments, but it was an interview with Andy Roddick, and he was discussing his rivalry with Roger compared to his rivalry with Novak, and very interesting comments. He has made these sorts of comments before, but basically saying that, with Roger, the main points that I got from it was that the strategy was like a chess match. His matches with Roger was always like a chess match, and it was a very clear strategy. Essentially, just attack Roger's backhand. Pretty simple, knowing that his sort of high, heavy top spin, especially as a lefty, going from his forehand to Roger's backhand, he was going to win probably 9 out of 10 rallies. And on clay, it was just, he was just a different beast, different animal. Whereas the interesting thing with Novak is he describes Novak as basically having the best ball control of any player he's ever played against. And that's a very interesting comment, just because we obviously know how good Novak is, but I've never heard him describe Novak in that way, using the term ball control. I guess, we think of all those three players having amazing ball control. I mean, you look at, say, Roger Federer, and he could do anything with a tennis ball, right? He could, obviously he could rally, he could hit it aggressive, he could slice, he could chip charge, he could volley, he could smash, he could hit drop shots, he had finesse, he could do anything. He's probably the best shot maker in the game. Whereas you look at, say, Novak, and essentially he was just basically a brick wall, but like a super accurate one, and he would basically just close in as the match goes on. And Nadal, in contrast, is probably a little bit of a combination of both Federer and Djokovic, in the sense that I'd still consider Rafa an aggressive player, but he also was just that, had that never say die attitude, could rally all day long, and just never gave up, and he basically just went into lockdown mode the tighter a match got. And so what I found interesting about Rafa's use of the word ball control for Novak is that, I had actually a discussion with a very good friend of mine who basically said, we were basically saying it depends how you define ball control, because, my friend basically said that in his eyes, Roger had the best ball control, because basically of what I just described before, is probably the best shot maker the game's ever seen. Everything he does, every shot he's got is basically a 9 out of 10. That's the easiest way to describe it. Whereas Novak, definitely, not all of his shots look pretty. Like, obviously his groundies are incredible. He's still got a decent serve, but he doesn't have the best volley technique, and his overhead smash has long been probably his weakest shot. Especially early on in his career. I think he definitely tightened it up as he progressed in his career, but definitely wouldn't say that he has, not all of his shots you would say like 9 out of 10 from like a technique point of view, or like a shot making point of view. And then Rafa, to be honest, has pretty, even spread of, shots across the board. Like, I don't think he has really a major weakness or a shot that's like, that much weaker compared to others. He obviously, like his serve, probably his second serve he had to strengthen as his career went on. He had a very slow, loopy second serve, whereas he turned it into more of a weapon with way more spin, and he was able to not be basically attacked on his second serve. And Novak did the same thing with his serve. Definitely made his serve more of a weapon. But just that use of the word ball control. I think the way I look at it is, for me, Federer, as I said, is probably the best shot maker, which does involve having a lot of control on your shots, or control over the ball itself. Whereas I think Novak just doesn't miss, just puts the ball wherever he wants, essentially. And the way that I like to think of it is if you compare, say, Rafa and Novak to Federer, the big difference really with all of them is pressure, and it's the pressure points, right? So essentially, the way I look at it is, whenever Novak and Rafa were under pressure, they just go into lockdown mode. They just don't miss. They almost become just like robots, basically, just defensive, but at the same time still able to hit winners. Like after long exchanges, they're still able to, like, you know, rip a winner down the line or whatever, or hit a drop shot, or, you know, bring their opponent into the net in a passing shot or a lob, things like that. So like they still find ways to finish the rally, but they're not in any hurry to finish. They're basically just trying to keep their opponent out there for as long as possible and make them win the match, basically. Whereas with Federer, he did the opposite. He was almost more aggressive when he was under pressure, and you saw that later on in his career, particularly when you know, we always talk about the Federer shank, right? And it's it's unfortunate that that's part of, and everyone knows, when I say that, everyone knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's a shame that, you know, Federer later on in his career was sort of known for that, and it was unfortunately a forehand shank that lost him the match against I think Novak in the end in that 2019 Wimbledon final. It's a product of his game. Just he's super aggressive, and he's always been a front runner, so he always wants to finish the match, finish the point on his terms. Whereas well, I guess Rafa and Novak also want to win on their terms if they're happy to just sit back in a rally and just go into lockdown mode. Whereas Federer couldn't do this because it's just his game didn't allow him to just go into lockdown mode like that. But I think it's just more that he was just more of an aggressive player. That's just, it wasn't in his DNA to just sit back and just rally with guys. He just had to take it into his own hands. So I think that's the major difference between those three players. But yeah, I just found it very interesting. I'm very keen to hear what your feedback is. You know, how you would define the term, you know, ball control, and you know, who your favourite player or who you think is the greatest of all time, and if it's the same one as the player who's your favourite. Because as I said, my favourite is always going to be Federer, but it's pretty hard to argue against Novak, and I'm very happy to concede that. Well, not very happy, but I'm you know, I'm honest enough with myself that it's hard to go past Novak as the greatest on paper. But yeah, all three of those guys obviously had such incredible careers and such amazing rivalries and very unique rivalries. The other thing I wanted to very quickly just finish on is the fact that those three guys, I mean, we do talk about it. It's talked about a bit, but maybe not as much as it should. And the age difference is definitely a factor. And also just when each of these players, you know, potentially say peaked in their careers. And you would say obviously Roger's peak period was, you know, between that 2004, well, probably 2005 to about 2008 or 9. Where he won the majority of his Grand Slams, and then he still played very good tennis from then on, but definitely started to more that Novak and Rafa started to, you know, come along and find they went through their peak. So, you know, Novak probably hit his peak at 2011, and then, you know, and pretty much from there until basically a couple of years ago, he was basically, you know, the best player in the world at that point, or, you know, solidified himself as the greatest of all time. And Rafa just probably falls in the middle of Federer and Novak in the sense that he was, you know, obviously as soon as he came on tour in 2004 or 5, he broke onto the scene, and he probably was the most consistent over a long period of time, but obviously, like, you know, mostly on clay. And then, you know, he had his moments like 2010, he won 3 out of the 4 Grand Slams. 2013 was a very good year, and then, you know, we talk about 2017 as, you know, that's also a year when, alongside Roger, he had a bit of a resurgence as well. So I would argue that those three players were never really like peaking at the same time. Potentially the closest in age in Rafa and Novak had the closest rivalry because they were the closest in age, only a year and a bit difference between them, and therefore like their rivalry, their head to head was very, very close throughout both of their careers. Whereas, you know, Rog has a good 5 or 6 years on both Rafa and Novak, so it's always hard to compare. And even though, yes, obviously, like, you know, Novak, you know, has basically been able to be consistent for as long, if not longer, than those two guys, and still winning Grand Slams well into his 30s. But you'd argue that Federer did the same thing in 2017, and even Rafa winning Grand Slams up until 2022. And now we're starting to see, you know, Novak at 37, just starting to slow down a little bit. Not to say that, you know, obviously he's still very much a chance in, these major tournaments, but you would say that he's getting to that point a bit like, Rafa was a couple of years ago and Rog, say 3 or 4 years ago, where he's just starting to, he's not finding his best form. He's starting to lose to guys he doesn't normally lose to, and lose in first and second rounds of, Masters 1000 events that he never used to lose at that stage of those tournaments. So, you would argue again, it's, the age thing has to be talked about when you compare these three great players. But yeah, anyway, guys, that's it from me. Very, very keen to hear your analysis on it, what your take was on Rafa's, commentary surrounding his rivalry with, his two biggest rivals in his career, in Roger and Novak. And as always, guys, please like and subscribe for more tennis and life-related content. Cheers, guys.